Hello, thanks for tuning in to the first webinar as part of Generational Renewal Week organised by Teagasc. My name is Kevin Conley and I work as part of the Teagasc Farm Management team. This is the first in a series of daily events running for this week during what we've titled Generational Renewal Week, which is dealing with this farm succession and transfer issue which every farm is going to have to address at some stage. Generational renewal is, I suppose, an umbrella term which covers the exit plans for the outgoing generation of farmers, as well as the paths by which the succeeding generation of younger farmers can get a foot on their farming ladder. And Teagasc is actively involved in advising farmers in this area with one-to-one advice, as well as through the annual Transfer in the Farm clinic events. And there's another series of these clinic events happening next month, and towards the end of this webinar, I'll highlight the venues for those clinics. The dates and topics for the events being held this week are hopefully visible to you on the screen there now. James, can you see those? They're coming through, I think, I hope.
Yeah, they're up there now, Kevin.
Okay, so there's also a QR code there available, which you can scan with your phone to register your interest in attending these events. In the 1 hour long webinars, which we're going to have one of those tonight, one tomorrow night and Thursday night, we'll be covering the topics of the importance of a will in farm transfer planning. We're going to be looking at some insights on how you can have that difficult, sometimes difficult anyway, family conversation around farm transfer, and how you could possibly avail of mediation if things get difficult in that area. We're going to be looking at the taxes that you need to be aware of when you're embarking on a transfer, as well as the topic for tonight's webinar, which is dealing with the whole area of collaborative farming options that can be used as part of a transfer plan. In addition to the webinars, there's also 2 on-farm events during the week, with a Wednesday evening farm walk in Roscommon dealing with the in-family transfer of a farm. And then later on in the week on Friday, we have a mid-morning event on a farm in Westmeath, where 2 unrelated farmers have come together to farm on the one holding, with one side looking at their future exit from farming and the other only embarking on their farming career. So these 2 events are going to showcase in a practical way how farm succession planning can be carried out. And you'll also get the chance to review the farm performance on the particular farms on the day as well. And we'll give a bit more detail on those maybe towards the end of tonight's talk as well. But now on to the webinar for tonight and the discussion. So we'll be looking at the whole area of collaborative farming options for farmers, focused around the area of generational renewal. And to take us through that is Ruth Fennell, and Ruth is the Teagasc specialist in collaborative farming, and she's going to be delivering around a 40-minute talk outlining how partnership, share farming, land leasing could be used as options as part of a farm transfer plan. Ruth's going to take questions after she's completed her talk, and I'd encourage any of you that have questions to type them into the Q&A tab as we go along, as they come to you. And we'll put those to Ruth at the end, and James McDonald is in hand with us here tonight to field those questions and put them to Ruth. Any question submitted is only going to be seen by the organisers of the webinar. It's not seen by the general audience, but we'll try and put as many of them as possible to Ruth during this live transmission for the benefit of everybody viewing, so you'll hear her answers without revealing the names of the questioners. But it must be said, I suppose, due to the complex nature of some of the queries that come in to these type of events, it might not be possible to answer all the questions that we receive on the night. It's also at this stage worth reminding you that this webinar is going to be recorded. So if by chance, if you miss something that's said, or if you're not able to stay the full length, you can view it later on in your own time. The recording is going to be available on the Teagasc website, and I'll give you details of the link of that before we finish. And at the same area of the website, there's also going to be a link to a booklet that was prepared for the Generational Renewal Week, which is all a good bit of the information on the material that's going to be covered this week and during tonight's webinar. So with that, I'll hand the floor over to you, Ruth. Thank you.
Thanks very much for that, Kevin. So look, as Kevin said, I'm currently working as a collaborative farming specialist in the farm management team based in Kildalton Agricultural College. And we often get asked, what is collaborative farming? And I suppose with the generation renewal, this really is going to play a huge role going forward in relation to addressing that and bringing the next generation onto the farm. And what I'm going to run through with you this evening is a number of different types of arrangements that both work within the family structure, or for those that are maybe looking outside of the family structure, whether that be an asset owner or an existing farmer, or whether that's a younger generation that's starting out on their farming career. So all of these options are currently there and up and running. We have a large section on the Teagasc website that goes through those as well, too, with template agreements. And what I'm going to just run through is a few of the different options, how they work, some of the strengths and weaknesses of those. And as Kevin mentioned there, we're going to see some of those in practice then in the farm walks later on in the week. And you will also be able to read about some case studies in the Generational Renewal handbook as well too, that's been produced, which goes through, for those of you that are not in a position to travel to the farms that are hosting the walks for us, you can hear their story firsthand in the case studies that are produced in the booklet. So to start with, what is collaborative farming? So it's where we bring two or more farmers together, where we pool their skills and resources, and we then look at cooperation and compromise and trust building over a period of time within that arrangement. And it's basically a formal agreement that has to be a win-win arrangement for both parties in order for it to continue and to last long-term going into the future. So as I said, two or more farmers, pooling of your resources, good cooperation, compromise and trust. And it's a formal then arrangement where we have benefit for all of the parties concerned. So if you're looking about the options to bring the next generation into the business structure, there's a number of ways in which that can be done, and some of the areas that we're going to address this evening. First, we're going to run through the registered farm partnership structure, which many of you will know about. Following on from that, we will then look at share farming arrangement. This is an arrangement that's currently very popular both in Australia and New Zealand, and it's becoming more popular within Ireland. It was originally set up probably more with a tillage focus in mind, and is now transferred over to the dairy side of it as well. And we have a number of these arrangements working successfully within the country as it stands. We're also going to look at land leasing. This is often considered one of the more hands-off arrangements, but you're going to hear firsthand of some examples where those arrangements from the landowner are still remaining to be involved within the farming system if that's what they wish to do as part of that arrangement. Following on from that, then, we're going to also hear a small bit in relation to the joint herd number. This is often also referred to as a joint venture. And then we're going to finish up just looking at any of you that are involved within a limited company on the farming system where the herd number is in that company, how we can use the structures that are there to bring on a next generation into that business structure. So these are collaborative options that we're going to address. There are numerous other collaborative operations that we cover within the farm management team, the likes of the sharing of nutrients, cow leasing, contract rearing and those. But the ones that we're focusing on tonight are the ones which would be more probably specifically be used in relation to bringing the next generation on board within the business structure. So I suppose in relation to the different arrangements that are there, people often ask us what arrangement would be most suitable for me. And what I generally say, there's a number of questions, whether you're an asset owner or whether you're a son or daughter or a nephew or niece coming onto the farming system, or whether you're somebody who doesn't necessarily come from a farming background but is looking to forge a career in farming itself. So we suggest that you address the following questions, and that will certainly give you a good lead into maybe some of the options following the presentation that we're going to give with you this evening. So do you want to be actively involved in the management of the farm? So in some cases, if we have an existing farmer and he wants to take a complete step back, we may look at the options, maybe the more inclined of the share farming or the leasing option. Or where we have an existing farmer that really wants to be hands-on and wants to bring a son or daughter on or somebody outside of the family into the arrangement but work alongside them, we may look at the registered farm partnership from that point of view. The next question we ask is, what kind of responsibility are you willing to take on? So are you happy to be kind of hands-off and just to get assigned duties, or do you want to be hands-on? Do you want to make management decisions within the farm? Do you want to do the financial business budgets, and do you want to plan forward as to where you see the farm going long term? We'll ask then, are you looking for a long-term commitment or a seasonal arrangement? So is this something that you see that will last long-term into the future, or is it something that you're looking at maybe as a stepping stone, or you're looking for just something short-term to get you through a period of time before you branch off into something else? And the final question then, Are you opening to partnering with non-family members? So I suppose the tradition within the Irish system generally is that farms and the farming businesses pass down through family generations. But we are finding that to be more challenging, certainly at the minute. We have farmers that don't have identified successors, or they have successors that are not in a position to come home farming at that time. And they're looking at alternative options as to how they can structure that business going forward. And they're certainly looking outside maybe the family in relation to doing that as it stands. So what we're looking at here, and we're going to start dealing with in relation to the registered farm partnerships. And what I've displayed in the diagram here is a collaborative pathway within a family structure. So this is where the current farmer is not ready to step back. So we might have an aunt and uncle, mother or father that are an existing or current farmer, and they're looking about bringing the successor, the next generation on board with them in relation to the business structure. The farm partnership model was running in France for a number of years. It was brought over to Ireland then and initially started as part of the milk production partnerships. In 2015, then those models were transferred and opened up to all enterprises within the agricultural system. And we currently have over 5,000 farmers that are operating under registered farm partnerships as it speaks. These are structures that are registered with the Department of Agriculture and are registered on their farm partnership documentation. Often where these are used is where the successor has been identified and he wants to become actively involved in the farm. So we would see in these arrangements is if we have a son or daughter, a nephew or niece that are just starting out, they might have just finished agricultural college. My advice generally on these is if that next generation has ambitions to maybe travel or to look further afield before they come home farming, allow them to do that and make those learning steps out into the industry itself. They may want to gain experience on working with different types of farms that they can bring that information forward and back to their own farm. So this structure is generally used where we're bringing the next generation on board and where they're actively looking to become involved in the farming system going forward. So we formed a registered farm partnership and we're going to go through how that works. It's an interim arrangement to all involved parties in the business structure. There is the option then down the road if people want to do that, or at the initial inception of the farm partnership agreement itself, to establish a succession farm partnership. And the difference between that and the registered farm partnership is the succession farm partnership will involve the transfer of assets also, and we're going to run through that as part of the presentation. Under the statutory regulations that are there for partnerships, they're required to run for a 5-year period from the date of setup. It's envisaged that they would last, in a lot of cases, maybe considerably longer than that. So over the course of that duration, the family may make the decision to transfer the assets under a succession farm partnership, or over time they may transfer the assets within the business themselves, but continue to operate under a registered farm partnership. And it doesn't have to have an end date at the end of the day. Those registered farm partnerships continue as long as they're farming under the regulations of the farm partnerships, and all parties within the agreement are happy for that to continue. So the partnership doesn't dissolve if they were to transfer the assets once they transfer within the partnership structure itself. And all of the individuals can stay farming under that model as they see fit going forward until they submit a dissolution agreement to the Farm Partnerships Office. So what is it? A registered farm partnership is where we have 2 or more farmers that agree to share so that they can enjoy an improved work-life balance and scale. In a lot of cases, these involve family partnerships, but we also have some operating very successfully outside of the family unit. And you'll see one of those in practice on Friday on the farm walk that we have. It can consist of 1 or multiple herd numbers. The maximum number that you can have in a registered farm partnership is currently 10. There's a single bank account where all of the partnership financial transactions take place through. And once we have that partnership account up and running, the accounts are done as they would be normally done for an individual. So they're registered with the revenue as a partnership. The accounts are completed for the entire partnership. And it's only then when we get to the bottom line of looking at the profits that they are then divided up in line with what we've identified as a profit sharing ratio as part of that partnership agreement. There are financial supports available for those that are operating under registered farm partnerships, and it's important to note, in order to avail of those financial supports, those partnerships must be registered under the Department of Agriculture as registered with the Farm Partnerships Office. So from a family point of view, why would we look at these registered farm partnerships going forward? So it's a gradual transfer of the management and the responsibility of running of the farm. So what it does is it introduces the next generation at a much younger stage. So often what would have happened before is that we wouldn't have maybe started the introduction of the next generation coming on forward until we were transferring the land. So what the partnership does is it allows the next generation to be recognised in the farm business at an earlier stage, and allows them to take on a more active role within the management of the farm itself. It also ensures that the parents, or whether that's aunts or uncles, are still actively involved in the business. So it's for all the world like a mentoring program. So the existing generation that would have been established for a long period of time are there to mentor the next generation coming on. And it's a much more gradual transfer of the responsibility of the running of that farm over time. So we will often find the next generation that's coming on will bring new ideas, will bring new technologies, will be maybe more inclined to look at embracing more sustainable practice. But the existing generation that are there will have huge years of experience and knowledge that none of those things can be learned out of books. And it's a great sharing of those resources to result in a more positive outcome for the farm going forward. One of the real aspects that I like about the registered farm partnership is that there's no requirement to transfer land as part of that arrangement. So that doesn't happen until either you make a decision that you wish to transfer the assets, or alternatively go into a succession farm partnership where you sign up for a commitment to transfer as part of that arrangement. We would also find that there's generally an improved work-life balance. We have a sharing of the responsibilities within the farm, and each generation will have their own roles within that farm, and that's clearly identified in the on-farm agreement that is part of the partnership application process. There are also additional income tax benefits that I'll run through in a minute, and there are also Department of Agricultural scheme benefits. So if we look at those financial benefits, so from an income tax point of view, in a registered farm partnership, we're able to maximise the family income at the low rate of tax. So as it currently stands, each individual is allowed to earn 42,000 as a sole trader before they pay any of the high rate tax at the 40%. So in a family scenario, if we had a mother, a father and a son or daughter in the registered farm partnership, depending on the profit sharing ratio that we've established within that structure, we could earn up on 126,000 within that family unit before any high rate tax is paid by the individuals within it. If we then go on to the stock relief, so there are significant advantages from a stock relief point of view for those that are operating under a registered farm partnership. So as it stands, every sole trader within the agriculture system is able to avail of 25% stock relief. When I refer to stock relief, that's the value of the stock at the beginning of the year or the opening inventory, and the change in value that's then takes place between that and the closing at the end of the year. So if that's a calendar year that you're operating on, it's the 1st of January opening stock versus the 31st of December closing stock. And the increase in the value of that is deemed as income from the farm. So as a sole trader, you can get 25% tax relief on that. In the case of a registered farm partnership where we have a young trained farmer, he can get 100% tax relief on, income relief on that, on 100% of it, in line with the profit sharing ratio that he has within that partnership structure. There is an upper limit of 100,000 on that over the 4-year period, with a maximum of 40,000 in any 1 year. This is hugely beneficial for those that are maybe making significant changes to the farming system or are increasing stocking rates so that the farm is able to then generate sufficient income for another generation that's coming into the farming business structure. So in addition to the young trained farmer, there's also enhanced stock relief for any parents or partners within that partnership. So as I mentioned, we have 50 or 25% stock relief for each individual. In the case of a registered farm partnership, that increases for those outside of the young trained farmer to 50%. And that's again on the same ratio that's on the profit share that's outlined in the partnership agreement. And that's limited to a maximum of 20,000 over a 3-year period. If we then look at the TAMS grants that are available, so any sole traders currently that are operating are able to avail of a 90,000 ceiling on the TAMS 3 scheme that's currently in operation. In the case of registered farm partnerships, that ceiling then increases from the 90,000 to 160,000, so an extra 70,000 available there. In the case of a partnership where we have a young trained farmer as part of that arrangement who's eligible and meets the eligibility requirements, we could have 60% of that 90,000 of the 160,000 is at the 60% grant rate. So the first 90,000 at 60% and the remaining 70,000 is either at the 40%, but if our partnership also contained an eligible female, we could then avail of the full 160,000 at the 60% grant rate. So significant improvements in that structure compared to what we would have as a sole trader. So what are the other financial benefits? So if we look in particular in relation to the basic income supports for sustainability scheme, or the BIS as it's otherwise known as, we have the complementary income support for young farmers. That's currently guaranteed until the end of 2027. And for those registered farm partnerships that contained an eligible young farmer, there was a payment of €163 per hectare in 2024. That payment is on a maximum of 50 hectares. So those farmers that had the full 50 hectares eligible within the scheme, they could get, in 2024, that payment went up to 8,150, where you had more than the 50 hectares declared. Obviously, if you have less than that, it goes back to the €163 per hectare. That payment is a maximum of €175 per hectare, and where it's oversubscribed, then that's reduced on a pro rata basis, and hence it coming in at the 163 in 2024. And that lasts for a maximum of 5 years, with a guarantee that it will last until the end of 2027. And we would expect, without any definite guarantees, that it would probably roll over with any subsequent schemes that will then be coming out after that. If we look at then the National Reserve, what this does, it's for those young and new farmer categories. And what it does is it gives us, where we have entitlements that are currently within the registered farm partnership that are below the national average, it will top up those entitlements to the national average. If we have naked ground or ground that doesn't have any entitlements, it will give us entitlements at the national average for that. And once again, that's at a maximum of 50 payment entitlements, so up to a maximum of 50 hectares. So if you had 50 hectares without entitlements, you would get 50 entitlements then from the National Reserve at the national average for that. Obviously, if you have less than that, it's only the number that you have, and it can do that. It'll start with the naked ground. If you're still less than the 50, it'll then top up any of the low value entitlements that you have. And it's important to note that you only get one go at the National Reserve. So just make sure when you are availing of that you make good use of it. Looking then on the final financial benefit in relation to the registered farm partnerships, we have a collaborative grant. And what this grant does is it assists and giving financial support to the setup of the registered farm partnership, where those partnerships contain an eligible young farmer, and that's important to note. So where you spend a maximum of €3,000, it will cover up to 50% of the costs of those. So anybody that set up a registered farm partnership in 2025 would have recently received an option to apply for that grant. And what they do is they submit invoices to the Farm Partnerships Office outlining the expenses that were specifically associated with the procedure of drawing up the partnership agreement, and up to 50% of those can be covered where there's a maximum spend of €3,000, so a maximum grant of €1,500. So who's eligible to join in a registered farm partnership? So as I mentioned earlier, to join in a registered farm partnership, we have to have a minimum of 2 partners, and we can have a maximum of 10 currently under the partnership system that's there. In order to form a registered farm partnership, there's 3 different categories of farmers. We've category 1, 2, and 3. So a category 1 partner is anybody that's been farming for at least 2 years with a minimum of 3 hectares of ground declared on their BIS application. And these are generally what we would refer to as the experienced farmer. So every registered farm partnership has to contain a minimum 1 category 1 partner. The second partner then can either be another category 1 farmer, which is another existing farmer that would have farmed for a minimum of 2 years with 3 hectares of ground, or alternatively a category 2 farmer. So category 2 farmer is anybody that holds an appropriate agricultural qualification up to a minimum level 6, and they also have to be entitled to a minimum 20% share of the profits within the registered farm partnership. So we have to, as I mentioned, either have a category 1. The second partner can either be a category 1 or a category 2. And then the third category that we have is anybody that doesn't meet the requirements of a category 1 or a category 2. And it's only when we have met the requirements of either 2 category 1s or a category 1 and 2 that we can then opt to join a category 3 partner into a registered farm partnership. So just to explain that a little bit more in detail, you'll see a number of different setups here. So in order to form the registered farm partnership, in the first line that you'll see, we have 2 partners, and they're both category 1s, they're both experienced farmers. In the second partnership that we have outlined here, we have a category 1 and a category 2, so an experienced farmer and a trained farmer. In the third option we have here, we have 2 experienced farmers as the category 1s, and then we've put in a category 3, which didn't fall into the category 1 or 2 option. And in relation then to the third option, we again have a category 1, an experienced farmer, a qualified farmer, and then a category 3, which didn't fit into either of those 2 options. So a category 3 might be a family member that you're bringing into the registered farm partnership that doesn't maybe hold a recognised agricultural qualification, or it could be a new company that's established that hasn't been up and running for the 2-year requirement to meet that category 1 status. Just a few points to note then. A limited company must have farmed for a minimum of 2 years in its own right before it can join a registered farm partnership as a category 1 applicant. You can't be represented twice within a registered farm partnership. So just to explain that a little bit more, you can't be a director of a company that's in a registered farm partnership and then also be listed as an individual within the partnership. So we do sometimes get queries where farmers have set up a new limited company and they then want to bring the son or daughter into a registered farm partnership with that company. They're not in a position to be able to do that until the company is up and running for a 2-year period to meet the requirements of the category 1 status. You can only be in one registered farm partnership at a time, and that's important to note. And the other one then is where we have a case of an existing joint herd number. So that's where we would have 2 or more individuals listed on an individual herd number. It's only one of those individuals that will qualify as a category 1 and make it eligible then to go forward maybe to form a registered farm partnership. So if we have a joint herd number and there's 2 individuals listed, unless one of those individuals holds a recognised agricultural qualification so that they will qualify as a category 2, we cannot move from automatically move from a joint venture into a registered farm partnership because it's only one of the individuals on the joint herd number that meets that category 1 status. So I'm just going to run through a quick example here. This is looking at an existing family registered farm partnership. So the first partner is our category 1 applicant. He's the existing farmer. This is John Murphy. He's been farming on his own for the last 10 years and he has 50 hectares of land. Okay. He's looking to form a registered farm partnership with his son. His son in this example here is James, and James has just completed his level 6 agricultural qualification. And as part of the requirements coming in as a category 2 applicant, James is going to have to be entitled to a minimum 20% share of the profits. The third partner that they're looking to bring into the partnership is John's spouse. Okay, this is Joan, mother of James, and Joan works off farm. She's working currently as a teacher. She hasn't previously been on a herd number, but she does play a role in relation to the farming business. She does a lot of the paperwork. She's also involved in helping out with the calf rearing process as well too. So the purpose in this one here is to demonstrate our farmer, that's John Murphy, is our category 1. Son James in this scenario is coming in as our category 2 applicant. They are therefore eligible to form a registered farm partnership because we've one category 1, one category 2. And Joan, John's spouse, is coming in as a Category 3 applicant. She doesn't hold a recognised agricultural qualification, and she didn't previously hold her own herd number. They're going to set up this partnership with a profit sharing split of 75 to John, 20 to James, and 5 to Joan. And the reason in this scenario why they're putting Joan in at the 5% is because of the fact that Joan is currently working off farm as a primary school teacher. All of the income that she's going to take from the registered farm partnership will be therefore taxed at the higher rate. So from a tax efficiency point of view, on recommendation from their accountant, they made a decision that Joan would be put in at a 5% share of the profits to minimise the tax implications for that. Just moving in then in relation to the cap payments that are assigned in relation to registered farm partnerships. So those partnerships can be set up either as a single herd, where we have all the individuals that are listed in the partnership added to an individual herd number, or we could also have individuals coming in on separate herd numbers, and we refer to those as a multi-herd registered farm partnership. So in the case of a single herd registered farm partnership, all the payments and the thresholds are based on the land that's declared under that one individual herd number. So when we refer to the complementary income support and the National Reserve, they are all based on the land declared under that individual herd number. We're also then capped for as a single payment for the CRIS and the ANC. When we then refer to the multi-herd partnership, so we have 2 or more herd numbers coming in and forming a registered farm partnership, it's the eligible land that's declared under each individual herd number that can be used then to support the individual entitlements that are held by each specific herd number within that registered farm partnership. It's important to note that the capping for the BIS payments will also then apply at the individual herd number level rather than at the partnership level, and the maximum land thresholds that will be available to each individual herd number for CRIS and ANC can be done at the herd number level rather than at the partnership level. So therefore, in a multi-herd partnership, nobody is disadvantaged by coming in into the partnership structure, which has always been something very important that was always supported by the Department of Agriculture. In relation to the stocking rate calculations then for the disadvantaged areas or the ANC payment, and also in relation to the eco scheme and the nitrates, all of that is then carried out at the overall partnership level. It's important to note for the ANC payments that if the partnership does not meet the requirements for the stocking rate calculations, then none of the herd numbers within the partnership will be eligible to receive the ANC payment. So what they do is they determine all of the land that's associated with the 2 herd numbers within the partnership. They amalgamate then the organic nitrogen from the 2 individual herd numbers if they've remained keeping the 2 herd numbers active, or they may have opted to make 1 herd number dormant but not end dated, so it's eligible for scheme purposes, and they may choose to run all of the stock through a single herd number, which makes it much easier, I suppose, from a management point of view, as in all the stock are run as one group. You're only meeting the requirements then for the single individual herd number from a TB testing point of view as well going forward. But the organic nitrogen from that herd number, when we're working out the stocking rate, is divided by the land that's declared under all the herd numbers within that registered farm partnership. If we then touch a little bit in relation to the succession partnerships. So as I mentioned to you earlier, with the advantages of the registered farm partnership is that there's no requirement to transfer assets within it. So it is a really good way of the next generation coming on board, dipping their toe in the water, giving a good try as to how the arrangement works, but there's no requirement to transfer the assets as part of that partnership arrangement. But where we refer to the succession farm partnership, it's quite similar to the registered farm partnership. It will be submitted in the same form, but there are some additional forms that then go in to the partnerships office to transfer to a succession partnership. And as part of this, it involves the transfer of the agricultural assets to the successor. And the partnership, in order to be able to avail of the succession partnerships, must contain a young trained farmer and cannot include a company. So it's therefore only available for natural persons. There's an annual tax credit of €5,000 per year, up to a maximum of 5 years, up until the year prior to the young farmer turning 40. So it's important to just note that when you're working the calculations in, if you're trying to see the benefits of a succession farm partnership, it is for a maximum of 5 years, but only up until the year prior to that young farmer before his 40th birthday. The agreement must specify that a minimum of 80% of the agricultural assets must be transferred to the next generation or the successor that you've outlined in the partnership between year 4 and year 10 of the partnership agreement. So 80% of the assets must be transferred before the end of year 10. You also must submit a business plan that has to go in as part of that, for which you will receive certification for, that goes in as part of the succession application. And it's important to note that the age of that farmer, when you go into that succession plan, can have implications because of the fact I mentioned you can't transfer the assets until the beginning of year 4. If the young farmer is over 32 years of age at the commencement of the succession partnership and they have to wait to 3 years, they may not then be eligible in relation to stamp duty relief at 0% for the young trained farmer. But that will be outlined in our succession taxation webinar later in this week. What we're looking at now is some of the collaborative options that might be available when we're looking outside of the family unit, but these could also be used within an existing family arrangement as well too. So on these arrangements, we're looking at some cases where maybe the current farmer is prepared to step back. They may have no identified successor, or they might have a successor that's currently not in a position to take over the farm, and they may be looking at a temporary arrangement going forward. It's often looked as an interim collaborative farming arrangement that can be entered into, and we can then look at further options down the road in relation to that. So what we're bringing together is the existing current farmer, a third party, which may not potentially be the successor, or it could be, and we're looking at some of the options here in relation to the registered farm partnership, the share farming arrangements, or long-term land leasing arrangements. And the long-term plan could be to continue with those options. It could be maybe to transfer it to the next generation, and they would continue under some of those collaborative arrangements with outside people, or a decision may be made to sell the farm where there isn't an identified successor, or the successor is making a decision to not come home to farm. Just to explain a little bit in relation to the share farming. So what is it? It's where we have two parties, the landowner and the share farmer, carrying out separate businesses on the same land without actually forming a company or a partnership. And that's an important point to note from a legal perspective. Okay, so we have no partnership agreement here, and we're not forming a company going forward as part of that share farm arrangement. Each party then contributes to the arrangement, and they take a share in the produce or the gross output. So as I mentioned earlier, these arrangements were commonly used in the tillage arrangements. So we might have an existing tillage farmer, and we could have somebody coming in as a share farmer. The share farmer might be providing all of the machinery and the labour associated with establishing the crop. The share farmer will be providing the land, and they will have conversations as to how that arrangement will work. They'll make decisions in relation to the cropping history. The crop will then be grown, and the produce then, or the crop when it's harvested, will then be split between the share farmer and the landowner, and it's up to them to sell as they see fit. All of that will then have been outlined in their agreement. So each party contributes their own costs of production, and then the share farmer and the landowner keep their own accounts. They calculate their own profits. And as I mentioned, these are separate and independent businesses. So they are not forming a partnership, and they're not forming a company together. So the concept of how it works, and you'll see in the picture here, this is the share farm that's successfully operating in Gurteen in West Cork. It's owned by Teagasc Estates, so these are the landowner, and we're going to see an example of that, the share farmer, which is Kerry Desmond. As I mentioned, two separate businesses. There's no sharing of profits, so that's how it's different to the registered farm partnership, where in the registered farm partnership, we have a single bank account where all of the operations run through that single account, and we split the profits at the end of that. In the example of a share farming arrangement, we have no sharing of profits. So what's involved with it? We put together a plan, we complete a legal document which both parties need to agree on, we discuss and arrange the budgets and the terms of that agreement, and we decide how we're going to share the input and the output as part of that arrangement. We then have the operational phase where each party within that have their own responsibilities and see those options through. And at the end of the year, then we finalise, each individual finalises their accounts. And we may decide to repeat that arrangement on an annual basis or for a specific term, or we may decide at the end of the year that we then that arrangement has run its term and it will be then dissolved going forward. So how do they operate? Each party is free to sell their own shares of the produce, Both of the individuals are responsible for their own costs of production. They both calculate their individual profits. The share farmer and the landowner are two business equals. They're both jointly responsible for the annual planning, including the stock, the breeding policy, the purchase and sales, the cropping and rotations. It's important to note in these arrangements that no rent is paid for the land to the landowner. The share farmer is not paid for his or her labour as part of that arrangement. And a contractor cost is not paid to the share farmer for the use of his or her machinery if that's included as part of the arrangement. It also is possible for one individual within these arrangements to be registered for VAT where the other isn't. And if they are registered for VAT, each party is then responsible for their own VAT returns. The following now is an example of the successful arrangement that's currently operating in Gertine Farm.
I suppose I wouldn't say the share farming opened doors for me, I'd say it blew them off the hinges.
Share farming, one of many collaborative arrangements, is where the landowner and the share farmer draw up an agreement whereby they operate two separate businesses on the one block of ground. Share farming operations can be used not only as a stepping stone in establishing a career in farming for those without their own land, but also as a way of the landowner receiving a financial return for their assets while not being actively involved in the day-to-day running of the farm. The following is the story of the Gertine share farming arrangement to date.
So my name is Kerry Desmond. I grew up only 5-6 minutes away from this farm in Bandon. Grew up on a small beef farm. So I went to Clonakilty Agricultural College, did the level 5 and level 6. Went to New Zealand with that, and then came back and did the 2 years farm manager's course in Moore Park. Yeah, so I'm share farming with Teagasc Estates here now. This is my second year. I started last year, 2024. Bought my cows the back end of 23. Started milking, started 24. It's a 7-year contract. So Teagasc Estates own the land and the buildings here. I own the cows. Everything is split 60-40, 60 to me, 40 to them. So the expenses I cover on my own are just veterinary, animal health and breeding for the cows. Yeah, and Teagasc Estates pay for all reseeding. Anything to do with buildings or land is fully on 100% Teagasc Estates. And then fertiliser, ration, the makey silage is all split 60 for me, 40% for Teagasc Estates.
My name is Pádraig Canaan. I'm leasing a dairy farm here in Clonakilty. There's 52 hectares here and we're milking 120 cows on spring calving. We're 4 months into our second year here on this farm. This is a 7-year lease, started in January of last year. So leasing the 52 hectares here, yard and all included. 16-unit dairy master parlour there, and there's 120 cubicles. Brought the herd with me from my previous farm in Gertine. So we brought 90 cows, brought in 15 in calf heifers. I had contract reared in Kerry, and I bought 21 animals off Connor that were due to calve as well that spring. He still does a lot of the contracting for me, as in fertiliser, mowing for bales. He draws my calves to the mart and a few bits like that. You know, we have a very good working relationship. Like, we had a small dairy herd at home when I was younger and a couple of sucklers. So I went to Mount Bellew, I suppose, with great intentions of going home and increasing the herd and all that, and realised that, I wasn't going to be able to do it at home. So decided to do the farm management course through Kildalton. Did my placement above in Meath and in Barry Row here in West Cork, and I haven't been able to get out of West Cork since, really. So when the opportunity arose for Gertine, I applied, was very lucky to get it. I suppose I wouldn't say the share farming opened doors for me, I'd say it blew them off the hinges, like, being quite honest. Like, I got talking to the guys in the bank. The banks wanted to push these share farming things. They were positive about it. I don't think I would have got the same positivity about going off leasing ad hoc without having had the experience in Gertine. 10 years' time, I'd love to say I'm still here, probably running a very good herd on a simple system and having a good lifestyle with my family. What gets me out of bed in the morning is I just love what I do. Always loved it. I'm doing what I've always wanted to do, and now I'm doing it with my own herd of cows. I suppose I wouldn't.
So you've heard there firsthand the arrangement that's currently operating. That's between Teagasc Estates, who the landowner in this case, and you heard first from Kerry Desmond. He's the existing share farmer that's there, and the second farmer that you heard of is Pádraig Coonan. He was the second share farmer in that arrangement and has now gone out onto a fully leased farm. So what does their arrangement look like? So it's, as I mentioned, one farm, two separate businesses. The term of the arrangement is to run for a 7-year term. That's what was put in as part of that agreement. But there is a 6-month exit notice on both parties for that. So if either the landowner or the share farmer wishes to terminate, they have to give a minimum of 6 months notice to the other party. All the details are outlined in a signed contract. There's regular communication between them, and they budget and negotiate as part of that arrangement. So as part of the share farming example that's here, Kerry Desmond provides the labour in that. He also provides the cows as part of that arrangement. And as part of the terms, it was specified that it had to be a minimum of 90 cows and a maximum of 110. In addition to that, Kerry provided a tractor which is used for the feeding of livestock. The landowner in this scenario provides all the land. If there was additional land required on a lease basis, it will be the landowner in this arrangement that pays for that. They don't provide any of the day-to-day labour, so although they're involved with the management of the farm, they're not hands-on on the day-to-day of it. They don't provide any of the cows, but they provide all of the facilities. And then in relation to the payment of it, the landowner provides and covers the costs associated with the facilities, the build-up of the P&K and lime on the farm, but not the general day-to-day fertiliser, which is split in line with their agreed ratio. They also cover major repairs, insurance, and the land rent cost. The share farmer in this arrangement, because he owns the stock, covers all the costs associated with veterinary AI, the machinery that he owns himself, the bringing in of the replacement heifers, and also all of the labour, whether that's his own or outside labour included. And then they split the feed costs, the general fertiliser, the routine maintenance, the contracting, and the parlour chemicals as part of that arrangement, based on the split that they have organised, which is currently 60-40. Just looking at the example here, the Teagasc Estates, to be fair, their setup is quite unique. They don't have any heifers as part of that arrangement. They're all cows within it, and every hectare on the farm is being used as the milking platform to generate income. So exceptionally positive income here that may not be able to be repeated on a general farm. So as we mentioned in relation to the income, the milk sales are split 60-40 between the share farmer and the landowner. The somatic cell count bonus goes all to the share farmer because it's based on the labour that he's provided, and because of the fact that he owns all the livestock, he receives all the calf and cull cow sales. The following then is the return to the landowner as part of that arrangement over the last 3 years. So as you can see in 2024, that income that was made up came to a total profit of €62,257. That's based on the 37 hectares of land that's owned and a small bit of leased land as part of it. If we look at the average over a 3-year period, that comes to an average of 63,000 for the asset owner, and that equates to, on an average over the 3 years, €699 per acre. And a lot of you will say, yes, that's a lot more than what we might be able to generate on a lease arrangement. It should also just be noted, this farm is operating at an exceptionally high level, and that income in this scenario here, they wouldn't be eligible to get the tax relief that would be associated with long-term leasing. But what is really positive about this model is that the asset owners as themselves are able to continue investing in the farm. This is a turnkey farm. So if this was a commercial farm with an individual that owned it and he had a son or daughter that wanted to come home long-term but wasn't ready to do that yet, he could still cover all of the costs associated with investing and keeping the facilities up to date, have that turnkey farm and have it kept up to date and ready for the next generation to come forward if that's what they wish to do in the long term. Just a quick look then at some of the alternative collaborative options that we mentioned. This is a joint herd number, or also sometimes referred to as a joint venture. It's where the young farmer's name is added to the herd number. It allows the eligible young farmer to apply for that complementary income support or young farmers that we mentioned earlier, which is €163 per hectare on a maximum of 50 hectares, and also the National Reserve, which is either entitlements on naked ground or top-up to low-value entitlements, again at the 50 hectares. It's important to note in these arrangements, though, it's not a partnership, and therefore they're not eligible to the TAMS Young Farmer Scheme unless both individuals on that joint herd number are young trained farmers. It also should be noted that if there is no written legal agreement on these, it will go back to the 1890 partnership law, and it's really important that you get very good, sound legal and financial advice before you enter these arrangements. If we look at then incorporation into a company, for those of you that are operating under a company structure and have the herd number in the company name, we will be looking at, for scheme purposes, those individuals that are entering that business structure, the next generation coming on board. They will have to have a minimum requirement then to be recognised for scheme purposes to be a director within that company, and also to be a minimum 20% shareholder. And that allows the eligible young farmer to apply for the complementary income support, the National Reserve, and also the TAMS ceiling for young farmers. They will be eligible to apply for the 60% grant rate of that, but only with a ceiling of 90,000, where it would be increased to the 160,000 in the partnership. If we just look then at the different models of those that we've run through, this gives a summary of all of those. So with the company, it's the company legislation. The labour is with what's agreed between the parties. The control is through the directors and shareholders, and they're eligible for the complementary income support, National Reserve, and the young farmer, but at the 90% ceiling, or the 90,000 ceiling. In the case of a joint venture, it's a legal document, or if that isn't in place, we're back to the 1890 partnership law. The labour is what's agreed between the parties. In relation to the control and the decisions of it, it's based on those that are named on the herd number. They will be eligible to apply for the complementary income support and National Reserve, but not the young farmer, unless all individuals are meeting the requirements of the young farmer. In the registered farm partnership, as you can see, that's ticking all those boxes. So it's a formal partnership agreement. The labour is provided by the partners. The control and decisions are jointly made, and they're eligible for the complementary income support, National Reserve, and the 160,000 with 90,000 of that at 60%, where we have a young farmer involved. If we look at the share farming, it's two separate businesses. It's provided by the share farmer, the labour in it. There will be some independent decisions and some collaborative. And because of the fact that the young farmer is not listed on the herd number, they're not going to be eligible for those schemes as part of that arrangement. If we just quickly then, before we finish up, look at the leasing arrangements, what we're talking about is official lease agreements, and the benefits for those on the from a leaser or a landowner's point of view. It's an opportunity for the landowner to step back entirely from the farm. You would have heard in the Pádraig Coonan story in that arrangement, although he's operating on a leased farm, the landowner is still quite involved in that arrangement. So it doesn't have to be completely step back if that's what the landowner wishes. It's a matter of finding the right person or the right tenant to take on the lease. Obviously, the lessor retains the ownership of the land. There's a tax-free income incentive that's included with it that I'll run to. And where the lease hasn't run for more than 25 years, they can still meet the requirements for the retirement relief where they owned and farmed that land themselves as an individual in advance of commencing on the lease agreement. There also is the opportunity for the development of the lands. If we then look at the tax incentives, so from a lease point of view, where those leases are registered with revenue, where the lease is for a minimum of 5 years, they can take up to 18,000 of that tax-free. It can include some of your business payments as part of that, and that can be included as the rental income. And obviously on an ongoing basis, that increases then. So if a lease is for 15 years plus, the individuals can take up to 40,000 income tax-free. It also should be noted that from a stamp duty point of view, if the lease is less than 6 years, stamp duty is payable at 1%. And if the land is jointly owned between two parties, those figures can be doubled in those arrangements. So the benefits for the leasee is we have security of tenure because they have a sworn agreement that they have it for a defined period of time. It allows them then to do longer planning of the farm business. They also have the opportunity to increase scale. Buildings may come as part of that arrangement, therefore reducing the need for them making capital investment on their own farm. And it's often, certainly with the existing land prices that are there in the country at the minute, it's often a more efficient alternative than purchasing the land. Some of the considerations that should be looked at: it's a legal agreement between the landowner or the lessor and the farmer, which is a leasee. To be eligible for the tax relief from rental income, they cannot be connected. That'll be going through in relation to the taxation webinar that we have coming up on Thursday. You also have to watch out in relation to favourite nephew or niece status. So although you can avail of the tax relief where an aunt or uncle leases it to a niece or nephew, if they lease the whole farm to them, then they're not eligible to qualify as a favourite nephew or niece status down the road. If you've availed of agricultural relief, the landowners who inherit the land but don't wish to farm it can opt to lease it, but they must note that that lease has to be in excess of 6 years and it has to be to an eligible farmer. The leases have to be registered with the Property Service Regulatory Authority, and it's really important in all these scenarios that you seek professional legal and financial advice from a solicitor and accountant or tax consultant before availing of these. The following now is an example of a really good lease arrangement.
From Newbridge, County Kildare, farming here in Sallins, County Kildare, working off 54 hectares, spring calf and dairy herd, currently milking 95 cows. I don't come directly from a farm. So when I left school, I went and I worked for 2 years. I decided I'd go get my green cert. I started relief milking for this man here when I was between kind of 16 and 17, in that period where I'd left school and before I went to Kildalton. And I suppose I continued relief milking with him all the way through college, and I had the weekends, and whenever I got a chance, said it to me, he was looking to slow down. And so that ignited the spark in my head. One evening after milking, I says, "You were thinking about scaling back a little bit?" And he says, "I was." I said, "Well, would you be interested in a young lad coming to you with a bit of an offer?" And he says, "Oh yeah, sure, whoever he is." And I said, "Well, me." I first approached banks, like it was kind of a mixed reaction. As I say, it probably wasn't fantastic, like, you know. Largely got to do with my age. The lease commenced then the 1st of January 2025, where we are now. So I was 22 at the time. I had, over the period of a year before that, I had bought in maiden heifers, and I had I put them in calf. So I had 32 of them to bring to the operation here. I also had his herd of cows. So what that meant was I had 52 of his animals and 13 of his heifers. So we agreed a price, and I'm leasing those animals off him on a yearly basis. And at the moment, we're just buying them through natural wastage. So if 5 of his cows leave the herd due to not going in calf, well then I fix up with him for that. Everything the farmer owns, the yard, the sheds, milking parlour, everything, the land, the cows and the machinery are in the lease, you know. It's for 7 years. And the reason we went for so short a period at the start was because that, as the farm owner said to me, "You're only young, and it'd be a terrible shame to say in 4 or 5 years down the line, you were to come to me and say, look, I don't think this is for me," and to be locked into a 15 or 20-year lease, you know, and there'd be major implications there. So what we decided is that after 2 years, we'd have a review. The end goal at the end of the day is to buy my own land. And I think this is the way that I'm going to be able to do that.
So you've heard a number of different stories there. That example of Conor Rinn, as he mentioned in the video, he hadn't a farm of his own to go home to, but he didn't let that stop him forging a successful career in farming, and he was anxious to take on a farm himself as part of that arrangement. There was a huge amount of planning that went in to get him set up in relation to being financially in a position that he was able to take it on. And it was, although it was an outside person from the family, it was somebody that was known well to him, and they forged a very, very strong positive working relationship going forward, where even in that scenario, the landowner put additional cubicles into the yard or into the milking parlour before that arrangement even started, to give Conor a good foothold going forward, and allowed him access into the farm in order to putting in a new water system and a new paddock layout as well too. So you've heard a number of examples of successful arrangements and how they can be used in different scenarios. And I think the important thing to note is there's a huge range of options available to you, but the most important thing is that we get the right people working together. So whether that's in a family scenario where we have a father or mother and bringing a son or daughter into the arrangement in a registered farm partnership, or we're leasing the farm to a next generation, or we're looking outside of the farming, the individual farming family, and we're looking at maybe temporary arrangements that we're bringing an outside person in on it, whether that's a lease or a share farm arrangement. There's a huge lot of options available to you all there. But as I said, the most important thing is to get the right people working together, to sit down and have honest conversations as to where you see your goals and alignments are. That's part of the partnership structure, that you sit down and have these conversations as to where you see the farm going down the road, and you make plans and make sure that you have aligned goals and aligned targets so that you'll be all working towards the same end goal at the end of the day, and being open and honest when you're having those conversations. So look, I think I've gone through a few examples with you, and I might bring Kevin and James on board now if there's any questions that you might have that you'd like to ask as part of that.
Thanks for that, Ruth. We'll let you draw a breath there for a second, but not for long, because you have questions up there, and there are questions in. So James, I'll throw it over to you there to put a few of them to Ruth there now, please.
Yeah, I might start with an easy one, Ruth. What do you think is the best time of the year to enter a registered farm partnership? I know with payments that sometimes people are reluctant, at certain times of the year, and maybe it might be the right time. So what's your take on, if you're going to form a partnership, what time of the year should it be done?
So look, by right, the Partnerships Office is open for applications all year round. So you can submit an application all year through. What we generally find in most scenarios is it's probably a good idea have a conversation with your accountant in detail as to why you're going this route. You'll also discuss it in detail with your agricultural advisor, who'll be able to outline the benefits in that to you. In a vast majority of scenarios, those registered farm partnership will start in the beginning of the year, in a January period of time. So from a family point of view, where they're bringing that next generation on board, they can start those conversations at a much earlier stage. They can have all the paperwork that's completed as part of the partnership application ready to go. And what we generally recommend is that you wait until your second BIS payment is through. So that's generally the first week of December. And you could then submit your application to change the herd number or add the individuals that are coming in on that partnership, and submit your partnership application then to the Registered Farm Partnerships Office. It is an option if you wish to go at an earlier stage. So assuming the BIS application has gone in for that year, we recommend that as soon as the BIS has gone in, generally we don't make changes to the herd number until the 1st of June. But after the 1st of June, you could make changes. But it is possible with some other schemes that there could be a slight delay in payments. So in an ideal world, we'll generally wait until the end of December, when the second BIS payment is through, and we'll start making our changes to the herd number and partnership application at that stage, but with a good lead-in time within the family as having those conversations and setting the structures up in place to commence in early in the new year.
Next question, Ruth. You went through a partnership with 3 partners, and you had a man, his spouse, and his son. Could partner 2 be the daughter-in-law and partner 3 be a son, depending on who has the green cert in that?
As I mentioned, the requirement is there. So you could bring in a daughter-in-law instead of the spouse if you wish to do that, as long as we have either 2 Category 1 applicants or a Category 1 and a Category 2 applicant. Then we can bring in another Category 3, which would be either somebody that doesn't hold a recognised agricultural qualification, or somebody that wasn't previously on a herd number for the previous 2 years with the 3 hectares. So you could have a father, and he could bring on the son into the partnership, and they may, assuming then down the road, they may want to bring on the son's partner or wife into that arrangement, and there's no problem to do that. She will come in if she holds a recognised agricultural qualification as a Category 2, so therefore she would be entitled to the 20% share of profits again too, or they could alternatively opt to put her in as a Category 3 applicant if they wish to do that. So yeah, it's open to, once you've met that requirements for a Category 1 and a Category 2 or 2 Category 1s, you can add whoever you want into the partnership as you see fit, as you wish to do so.
Okay. On the herd numbers, you mentioned herd numbers. Can the existing herd number stay as is, or do you have to set up a new herd number if we get in a partnership? So I think maybe there's confusion, the number tends to stay the same, doesn't it? And the names change, so you might explain that. Ruth.
Yeah. So what happens is the farm as a unit, let's just assume that this is a single herd registered farm partnership. So maybe the parents have an existing herd number, and they wish to then bring the son or daughter involved into that registered farm partnership. So what they'll do is they'll submit an ER1 form to the local district veterinary office, and what they'll make an application to do is to add the son or daughter's name to that herd number. So the herd number itself will stay the same, but the registration details or the ownership details of the herd number will change. So instead of it being maybe mother and father on it, it'll now be mother, father and son. So there might be 3 individuals listed on the herd number where there was previously 2. They will still have the same herd number, but assuming then they submit a partnership application to the registered farm partnerships, they will be then issued with an RFP number. So depending on what county you're in, you'll have whatever the initial is for that county and an FP after that, and then 5-digit number. And that's on the scheme number that you will use for submitting any scheme applications going forward. So your herd number will be still there, your stock will all run through that herd number, but for scheme purposes, the applications will be submitted through the RFP number or the partnership number.
Okay, there seems to be a lot of questions and some of them are marked anonymous, so it means we can follow up if we don't get to those questions. So if you have a name on it and we don't answer the question, we might come back to you separately afterwards. Just one on another one on the partnership, and then I'll move on to something else. If a partner dies within a partnership within the first few years, what happens?
Officially, if one of the partners is deceased, then it's a requirement to dissolve the partnership. Now, all of that will be done through the Inheritance Inquiry Unit with the Department of Agriculture. So if there is an individual that passes away, the first port of call generally after that is that either the executor of the will or the solicitor will make contact with the Inheritance Inquiry Unit. The partnership will run in the background, but will appear generally up as a reps of until probate is granted. And the family, they can make a decision in those scenarios, or individuals that are maybe not related can make a decision then that either they dissolve the partnership and they don't reform, or alternatively, assuming that they're going to be eligible to form a new partnership, they can dissolve the existing partnership and submit a new partnership application with different parties involved with it. Where I mentioned earlier there in relation to the joint venture, and I said only one individual qualifies as a Category 1 applicant. So if we had a scenario where we had a husband and wife in a registered farm partnership with a son or daughter, and maybe one of them passed away, the other individual is automatically allowed to meet the requirements of the Category 1 applicant, where the other is deceased. But it's important just to note, if we were looking at a multi-herd partnership and we didn't have others that were coming in that we weren't meeting those requirements under the new structure as either the 2 Category 1s or Category 1 and 2, we may not be in a position to form a new partnership. But in a lot of cases, we will if that's the step the family wish to take going forward.
Okay.
Just before you move away from partnerships, James, just one other question there. You mentioned a few times, Ruth, about an application to register the partnership. What other paperwork or documentation is required as part of that registration process?
So as I mentioned, there's a large section of information up on the Teagasc website. So any of you that are looking to get further details, we have the farm management section under the collaborative farming. There's a drop-down box there for registered farm partnership. And if you go into the registration details, you'll find a checklist for all the documents that are required to go in as part of that partnership application. So as part of that, we have what we call a partnership agreement that outlines what each partner is registered within that registered farm partnership and what assets each individual is bringing to that partnership structure. And that's really important. That will go in on the capital accounts. So if and when that partnership is ever dissolved, each of the individuals within that partnership are entitled to take out what they bought to that partnership structure. In addition to that, it will specify the profit sharing ratio for the partners within that arrangement. We will also have the on-farm agreement then, which specifies how the partnership is going to run on a day-to-day term, how individuals and what roles each individual is going to take on, and how that's going to work going forward into the future. We also have documents to confirm that a bank account has been opened in relation to all the partnerships, and that's submitted as part of it as well too. And they'll also submit the folios that are associated with the owned land, copies of leases then for leased land as well too, and all of that goes in on the partnership application. So if there's a young farmer and going in as a Category 2, they will also have to submit their agricultural qualification applications to prove that they are meeting those requirements for the Category 2 status. So there's a checklist on the Teagasc website there under Collaborative Farming and Registered Farm Partnership, and the list of all the documents that are required to go into the partnerships office as part of processing that application.
Ruth, another question just on a company, this time with a twist. Can a farm company enter a partnership?
Yeah, so it depends on how you want to structure that company and who the directors are. So as I mentioned previously, you can't be represented twice within a partnership. So if the company is going into a partnership, none of the individuals that are either directors or shareholders within the company can be listed then as an individual partner within that registered farm partnership, because you can't be represented not only in the company, but then as an individual. So if a company is up and running for 2 years or more than that, with at least 3 hectares of ground declared, you might have the parents that are both involved within the company structure, and they may choose to bring a son or daughter either into the company structure, as I mentioned, where in order to qualify for scheme purposes, that would be a director and a minimum 20% shareholder, or they might form a registered farm partnership and they will get the increased TAMs associated with that and the benefits then in relation to the stock relief and that for the young trained farmer. And they can form a registered farm partnership with the company coming in as a Category 1 and the son or daughter coming in as a Category 2 applicant. So assuming that company has been operating for at least 2 years with at least 3 hectares declared, it can come in. Or alternatively, you could have the company structure coming in as a Category 3, and as long as the individuals within that company are not listed as partners either as a Category 1 or 2, you still may be able to bring in a company structure as a Category 3 applicant in a registered farm partnership.
Okay. You mentioned lots of incentives during your talk, and a question here. For those not qualifying as young farmers, so they're more than 40, what type of supports can they avail of in what you mentioned?
So they're more than 40. There is the National Reserve for those farmers as well too that are new entrants into farming but never and wouldn't have availed of them previously. So they can apply for the National Reserve in relation to those. That would be an option for them too. And I suppose they're getting the advantages in relation to the TAM. So where you form a registered farm partnership, as I mentioned, as a sole trader, that ceiling is coming in at 90,000. If they were to form a registered farm partnership, they can still come in as a Category 2, even if they are. So originally when the partnerships were set up, there was an age limit on the Category 2 applicants. That's no longer there. So once you hold a recognised qualification, you can come in as a Category 2 applicant, and their TAM ceiling would then increase to the 160,000 within the partnership structure. And if they're in those scenarios where they're coming in as a female and they hold those agricultural qualifications, they can get the 60% grant on the TAMs for the first 90,000. Alternatively, if they were on the herd number pre-2022, they can also avail of the women's scheme as an individual as well too going forward.
And is the stock relief available as well for 2 partners in a partnership that are over 40?
Yeah, so that's still available within the registered farm partnership. So as I mentioned previously in the presentation, if it's a young farmer, he'd get 100% on it. If you're an individual, it's 25%. And if you're in a registered farm partnership, that increases then to the 50% in the case of the members of the registered partnership.
Okay. Is there a maximum age limit on the female farmer qualifying for the TAMS grant? It's just when you mentioned that.
Yeah, so 67 is the cutoff in relation to that.
Okay, right. So people should have plenty of time. There's an awful lot of questions here, and I don't know will we get to them all. And some of them there's a bit of crossover maybe to what's going to be covered another night. In terms of tax incentives and questions like that. One question, do we help pairing farmers with professionals such as solicitors, accountants and mentors? So I'll let you give your opinion on that one, Ruth.
Look, I think it's really important that if you are entering into any of these arrangements, that there is a really good lead-in time. that you make sure that the individuals that you're partnering with, that you've had a genuine and honest conversation as to how this arrangement is going to work. And that's the most important thing going forward. We do have template arrangements for everything that I've gone through here. So there is partnership agreements, there's share farm arrangements, there's cow leasing. You heard that as part of the Conor Ince story. He's leasing cows as part of that arrangement. So we do have template agreements, which takes out a lot of the difficulty in relation to forming those arrangements going forward. And what we would suggest is that obviously the individuals that you'll be working with in relation to assisting you making these decisions is the most obvious person is your own accountant, because he has a very good understanding of your own legal structure. We can also strongly advise that your advisors are brought into these scenarios. So where there's any queries that your accountant may have that he's not sure about, he can liaise with your own individual advisor, and the farm management team are also happy in relation to getting involved in those conversations if further assistance is needed then outside of that. But it is obviously important that those that are drawing up these arrangements for you and assisting you with that have a good understanding of how those models work. And in some cases, it may involve getting outside assistance other than the existing solicitor that you might currently be dealing with. And look, at everybody has their strengths and weaknesses, and you might be dealing with a solicitor that has some very good understanding of some things, but maybe not so good on maybe succession or the partnerships. So it's important, whoever that you're dealing with, that they obviously have a good knowledge of how these arrangements can work going forward.
I might ask you just two more questions because I'm watching the time. And
quick ones, James, I'd say.
Can a company enter into a succession farm partnership? I'm assuming that this company owns assets like land, if the question is being asked. And the second question is, in a land lease arrangement, what expenses is the landowner responsible for? So they're the final two questions.
So can a company can't avail of a succession partnership? So that's only an option that's open to natural persons. So if you're in a registered farm partnership with a company, you can't avail of the succession partnership. So it's only where there's natural people involved within the partnership. Okay, so that's not an option. In relation to, sorry, the second question, James?
The lease. So in a lease arrangement, what expenses is the landowner responsible for?
So that's really up to the individuals and what they specified within the lease agreement. Okay, so generally the landowner will still insure the assets as part of that. So if there's buildings in that as part of it, he will still be covering the insurance of those because he's the owner of those assets. But then it's up to the individuals then within the individual lease agreement. So the landowner may make a decision that he's going to cover all the likes of the hedge trimming and that as part of it. But alternatively, it might be put in as part of the lease agreement that's covered by the leasee, and it'll stipulate as to how that's done. So there are template agreements there. There's a very good IFA master lease, which a lot of individuals will use. And it's a matter of going through that, using it as a template and making any adjustments that you see fit as you work your way through that agreement. So it's really up to the individual parties within that lease arrangement.
Okay.
Okay, I think that's we'll try and draw the session to a close at that. Thanks, Ruth, for that presentation and the comprehensive way you dealt with all those questions. And there, as James said, there's quite a few questions in there which are going to cross into areas that are going to be dealt with later in the week. So for those of you that don't have a name against the question, we may very well have that question answered in one of the later webinars, particularly some of the tax ones that have come in there. So thanks again, Ruth. Ruth was the main organizer of this week's series of events as well, and she deserves great credit for the program that she's put together. And just to say the amount of ground that she covered there, it's obvious like there's a lot of information to take in. So the recording of this webinar is going to be available on the Generational Renewal webpage in the coming days. And if you just search for Teagasc Generational Renewal, it'll bring you up to that page. And you can click on that and access it there. The link, that same link, will also bring you to where the booklet that Ruth mentioned at the start is also available. This Generational Renewal Week booklet, which was put together for this week's events. And just to remind you that there's two more webinars to come. There's one tomorrow and one on Thursday evening, and you can use the exact same link that you used to access this particular webinar, to access the next two, and you see the detail on those up on your screen there now at the moment. And just a reminder again that both those webinars start at 7:30. And don't forget about the two on-farm events. The one on Wednesday on the farm with Jerry and Shane O'Connor near Clonfad and Castlerea in Roscommon starts at 6:30 in the evening. And then the one on Friday on the farm with Tony McCormick and Chris Cahill, which is near Delvin in Westmeath. And I think that's an 11 o'clock in the morning start for that one. And if it suits you to go, you'll hear plenty about generational renewal and the different options that were looked at for those particular farms, and you're also going to see the operation of those farms as well. So it's well worth taking a bit of time, if you can at all, to attend those events. I'd just like to also take the opportunity just to mention the 2025 series of Transferring the Family Farm events that Teagasc hold annually, and these clinic events are happening towards the end of the month and running into October. There's 6 events planned in different locations around the country: Galway, Roscommon, Tipperary, Waterford, Cork and Monaghan, and the full details of the locations are up on the screen there now as well. If you do plan on attending any of those events, and you're more than welcome to attend multiple versions of them if you can, but please use the registration facility there to pre-register. It just gives us an idea of numbers that are going to turn up, so we can set the day up properly for you. There's a QR code that you can scan with your mobile phone up on the screen there. If you don't want to go down that route, just ring in the local office, your local Teagasc office, and they'll book you into whichever of those events that you want to attend. And all family members are free to attend those events, and they're free as well. So there's a lot of very good information. A lot of the information that you heard today in relation to collaborative farming will also be available at those events as well. So with that, I think we'll sign off on tonight's webinar. Thanks to all of you that registered and joined in tonight and put in your questions, and we hope you found it useful. And thanks to James for dealing with the questions, and to Ruth again. So thanks again, everybody.
Thank you.